Hi, welcome to Rome.
In this lesson, we're going to talk about culture and its influence on people as individuals and members of groups. My goal is to help you understand how culture works as a phenomenon and to learn more about cultural frameworks. This will hopefully help you see cultures with richness and complexity, moving beyond stereotypes and simplistic categorizations of people.
After you've been abroad for a little bit of time, whether it's a few days or a couple of weeks, you're hopefully starting to get a little bit better understanding of what a culture actually is. It's more than just the superficial look of a place and the basic mannerisms of the people, although of course these are interesting and hopefully you're learning about these. But what we want to spend some time talking about in this lesson is delving a little bit deeper into the motivations and values that drive the visible things that you see. So I've mentioned that I want you to start thinking about culture in more complex ways. And one framework for doing this is Hofstede's levels of mental programming or levels of influences. What Hofstede proposes is that we have three levels of influences on us. We have a human level, basically human drives and biological innate influences. We have a cultural level, which are the aspects of ourselves that are socialized and enculturated by our community. And then we have a personality level, so a level of things that are unique and unique to each one of us and driven by our own personality. So the first level of Hofstede's theory refers to the human experience or the set of human influences that we have. So as part of our human experience, we all have a basic set of needs and influences that drive our behavior. A need for shelter, a need for food, a need for sociability, friendship, companionship, love. So these are things that across the human experience, all people have an innate drive for. Our culture is our next level of influence, and our culture often influences or dictates even how we manifest those needs for food, shelter, relationships. So culture sort of describes or influences how we eat our foods, what rituals we attach to our foods, the kinds of foods we eat and when we eat them. It influences our shelter, the type of shelter we have, the way that we physically structure our shelter, who lives within our shelter, our relationships, so how we form friendships, how we define love, how we define relationships. So this is a cultural level of influences. The next level of influence is our personality, and these are the things that are unique to each one of us, the things that make us who we are. So in Hofstede's proposal, we're all made up of these three levels of influences, and we all have human experiences, the basic human needs that influence us. We have the culture that we're a part of that influences, and then we have our own personality that influences. And every one of us is complexly and richly made up of all three of these sets of influences. So one thing I'd like you to work on while you're abroad is seeing the people you meet with this kind of complexity, recognizing that every individual you meet does have a human experience in common with you, a cultural experience in common with the other people of their culture, and a unique experience that is their personality.
To practice applying these concepts, here are some tips. For example, if you feel like you're not even seeing any cultural differences, try some of these activities. Or if you see differences, but you're not sure whether they are cultural or personality, try some of these activities. Or if you catch yourself being negative and stereotypical of the people and their culture, try some of these activities.
So this means recognizing that on one hand, it's really simplistic to say things like a smile is a smile everywhere and we're all just the same on the inside. There's a truth to this, but this is only looking at that one layer of influences, that human layer of influences, and ignoring all the other things that influence an individual. It's also really simplistic to categorize everyone in this culture as X, Y, and Z, to say they're all just the same, because that really diminishes the uniqueness of personality and the diversity of who we are as individuals, as well as the common experience that we have as humans. It really separates us from the people that we're interacting with as totally different from us. And finally, of course, it's really simplistic to say, well, everyone's just an individual and everyone is different and culture doesn't matter. Culture does matter. We do have a culture. We do have this set of experiences that put us in common with other people like us, ways of thinking and ways of behaving and ways of interacting. And we can't ignore that there is commonality and there is a cultural experience. So what we want to see is the vastness of what we have in common with other people as humans, what people within a culture have in common with each other, and what makes each of us unique as individuals. So we know there's a great deal about our human experience that's biological or innate, and a great deal of our personality that's biological or innate. What makes culture so interesting to study and to consider is that it is the piece of our experience that is learned, that is acquired, that's passed on from generation to generation. So unlike the other levels where the biology and the innateness is really driving it, culture is the experience that we're socialized into. It's what we are teaching our children about behaviors and thinking, and it's what becomes ingrained in us so that we think that it's natural, but it really is our learned experience of interacting in the world, interacting with other people. So culture is in many ways the experience of defining a group of people, or a group of people defining themselves as similar to one another and different from other people. So in a sense, creating an in-group and an out-group, although unconsciously, and marking ourselves as members of an in-group and distinguishing people who aren't part of our in-group as out-group. And there are many ways that we mark our membership in our in-group, through the ways that we dress, through the ways that we interact, even through the ways that we think. Because we're social creatures, we very much want to show that we're part of our culture. We want to show that we're part of our group. We want to mark our membership and our similarity with other people, even though we also want to show our own personality and our own uniqueness. But the desire to be a member of a group, to belong, and to be part of to be accepted, is very strong, even if it's unconscious, and that's why we form cultures. So when you're crossing cultures, it's important to recognize, first of all, the influence of culture, the drive to belong to a group, the drive to show membership in the group. It's also important to understand that within a culture, the ways that people act and interact are very logical and coherent and organized. I like to say that people are rational if you understand their rationale. And so it's important for us to, when we cross cultures, to recognize this, to value the thinking and the habits and behaviors, not just as normal to these people who are different than us, but as valuable and as valid. And finally, the last piece is recognizing and remembering that culture is socialized, and that means it's learned and acquired. And in recognizing this, we can move away from judging other cultures as inferior, as saying they're stupid or dumb if they only knew my way of doing it, and instead value that the way they do it does make sense. It is smart and valuable and logical to people in the way that they're interacting, and it has been taught to them and acquired by them as a normal and natural way of interacting. So with this information, I hope that you can begin to see your culture in more complex ways, to see the people that you interact with in more complex ways, and start to distinguish a little bit more about the cultural experience that you're taking part in.